Hi, romance readers. I am Liz Donatelli. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, the #1 romance novel talk show on YouTube. Authors of Scottish romance, Heather McCollum and KAIT Nolan, join me for a special Hot for Scots discussion. Enjoy, and be sure to like and subscribe. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance.
Hi. Hi. Glad to be here.
First off, in preparing for our chat, I discovered something. Do you know what a person who loves all things Scottish is called?
Well, I know Anglophile is
for English.
Right.
English.
But there's actually special ones for Irish and Scottish. The Latin name for Scotland is Caledonia. I'm thinking maybe, Heather, maybe you might have come across that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So someone who's into all things Scottish is called a Caledonophile.
Oh.
I have learned a thing.
So now you learned something new. Are you Caledonophiles in your everyday lives or just on the page?
I am all Scottish, definitely. I married into it.
Okay. So you have a real personal tie then to Scottish culture.
Yes. Well, don't tell anyone, but his mom was he's more English, but McCollum, it's the Scottish side. And so I told him that's my real name, Heather McCollum. And I told him I married him for his last name. Not really, but
it's interesting you say that because I really thought that was your pen name.
Oh no, it's my real name. Yeah.
Wow. So you were always destined to write Scottish romance.
Yes, that's what I grew up reading and couldn't wait to get over there. And I collect coups and even met some while I was over there. So yeah, I'm really kind of a Caledonian.
A Caledonophile.
A Caledonophile. I need to write that down so I can remember it.
KAIT, are you a Caledonophile only on the paper, on the written word?
No.
Oh, okay.
My family is my family and my husband's family both hail from Scotland. I'm kind of evenly split between Scotland and Ireland. And I studied abroad there back in college and absolutely fell in love with everything about the culture. So I basically start my morning every day with a cup of Scotland because I have my Scottish breakfast tea, which
I do too. Yes.
Brewed strong enough to dance on the table. Adagio is my favorite. Harney and Sons has a pretty solid second, and then the English Tea Store is like the third.
Okay. Wow, I did not expect both of you to actually have Scottish ancestry.
The kind of Scottish diaspora around the world has one of the strongest kind of group ties, kind of back to the homeland, as it were.
Yeah.
So you tend to see that a lot.
Wow. Very cool. So what inspired your love of writing Scottish romances? I'm assuming not only your own heritage played some part or even, marrying into it. So was that kind of where it began? Were you like, well, I have this part of my life and I want to explore that in romance? What would you say, Heather?
Well, I didn't meet my husband until I was in my 20s, and I was already addicted to Scotland by reading Julie Garwood's Scottish romances back when I was in high school and falling in love with The Secret was my favorite book. And I just loved the history and the passion of the people in the books. And I did some research, nonfiction research, and it backed up all that passion and all this wonderful drama in the past. And then I met my husband in college, and it just seemed to back it up. Although he doesn't, I keep trying to get him to speak with a Scottish accent. He doesn't have that, but he does wear his kilt, our McCollum tartan. It's hard to see in this light, but we have our McCollum tartan, and he wears his kilt to all my book signings, which is very sweet.
That's awesome. Have you ever, now I've seen your book covers. Is your husband somewhere in those book covers? Did you ever have him dress up and appear on the
So in my very first book, where it's like a chest, that's sort of my brand, a naked Highlander chest. I thanked him in the back of the book for posing for the cover. Well, my husband plays ice hockey, and he definitely is not, he's a lot hairier than the guy on the cover. So all of his friends teased him so badly that I put that on the back in the acknowledgments. Thank you, honey, for posing for the cover.
That's awesome. I love it. Kate, so what inspired your love of writing Scottish romances?
The actual writing of it has been fairly recent because my primary sort of area of expertise, as it were, is Southern small town, because I'm from Mississippi. But because I studied abroad over there and fell in love with it, actually I was over there right when Outlander was really becoming huge. So I remember like sitting on the train with the big doorstop book, and I read it in 24 hours and then like immediately bought the second one because I had to know what happened. And then I was desperately waiting for book 3 because no, you couldn't leave me there. But so I always knew that I wanted to come back and revisit it in fiction at some point. It was only this year that I finally got around to actually doing that. My stuff is contemporary, Scottish small town, which is not exactly a thing in terms of like an expected.
Yeah.
If you like search on Amazon for contemporary small town, it's still filled with lots of historical results. But like Heather, the people and the culture they're so much fun, and they are the kindest people I have ever met. Like, we as Southerners, we are known for our hospitality, and going over there, it's like, oh, this is where this comes from, because this is largely who settled down here. And so that was a lot of fun, was to finally get to sort of explore that. And because I tend to connect everything to everything, I sent some of my Southerners over to Scotland so that I still had some of that original brand in there, and follow that through.
Right. Now, you mentioned Outlander, the novel. Did either of you draw any inspiration from Highlander, the movie, or the 90s TV series Highlander? Were you influenced at all by that? Because that was pivotal for me. Oh, okay. There you go.
I loved Adrian Paul in the TV show.
My husband and I have a long-standing argument about this, because I loved the 90s TV show and he loved the movie. And I'm like, the dude was French or Belgian or something.
I think Christopher Lambert, who did the first, I think, 3 movies. Yes, I think he's French. Yeah. Adrian Paul was perfect. My brother and I used to watch the show. It used to air on Saturdays for some reason in New York where we lived. And they eventually had the box set of VHS tapes of all the Highlander episodes of the television show. And I remember my mom buying it for my brother for some birthday or Christmas. And we loved it. We would just be popping in, like watching all the episodes. There's nothing like Adrian Paul. To me, that's when I started really like, ooh, Scottish. Yeah, Scottish guys. I had a feeling that you both had to have known something about Highlander, the television.
I heard a rumor that they were going to do like a reboot or something.
Really?
I did hear something about that, but I don't know any details.
Oh, well, that's exciting. I got to research that. I just assumed that's something that would never come back, but
I don't know. They're tapping everything that happened in the 80s these days. So
yes,
that is true. That is true. Heather, you recently released Highland Surrender, book 5 in your Scottish historical romance series, Sons of Sinclair. Yeah. Could you give us a little background on the series and tell us about Highland Surrender?
So the series is 5 books, and it's now complete. It's about 4 brothers and a sister. So the 4 brothers, this is in, let's see, the 1590s in northern Scotland. And these 4 boys were raised by their father, who was like a warlord kind of father. And when his wife died, giving birth to the 4th son, he kind of went insane. He felt it was the end of days. And so he decided to raise his 4 sons as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So the first book is about Cain, the horseman of conquest, and then we've got the horseman of war, the horseman of justice, and the horseman of death. And so the horseman of death boss, he actually was named Death, is Scottish Gaelic is boss. And at 5 years old, his father told him that his mother was his first execution. And so he was to be an executioner. Wow. And so the four boys, they go through a lot, because as they are challenged by these very strong heroines that I introduce, they realize that what they've been, given to, what they were raised to believe is not how the world works, if you want it to work well. And so, like in the first book, which is Highland Conquest, Cain, conquest is all about taking things, and love is all about giving things. So in order to win the greatest prize of all, Cain's world breaks apart, because he has to learn how to give instead of just taking, especially when he's powerful enough to take everything. Okay, so in the fifth book, Highland Surrender, their sister, who was actually the fourth born, but since she didn't work into the legend of the four horsemen, she was ignored. She was put in the corner, but she, over the last four books, has slowly come out of her shell. And so in this book, a warrior of Viking descent comes over to Scotland on a secret mission, which includes her abduction. So it involves the entire family, the strong wives, the heroes of all four books, and some of the children. And it's just it's fun, but it's also, sort of life-shattering for them. It changes everything about their lives, and but it brings the whole family, the clan, really together, and also introduces the wolf warriors, which are the warriors from Norway.
Wow, that's a lot of story. So Kate, your Friends to Lovers romance, Single Dad in a Kilt, is a new release in your Kilted Hearts series. Could you share a bit about the series and tell us about Single Dad in a Kilt?
Single Dad is the last book in the series, and it is sort of the culmination of what gets set up in the prequel. It's a 5-book series plus the prequel. So basically, this idea had been kicking around in my brain since 2014. And it was supposed to be a standalone that was not actually about them. I had this ridiculously wild idea to take the idea of an arranged marriage attached to a title and make it contemporary, because a 300-year-old marriage pact is not a thing most people would expect in contemporary. And I'm like, oh, that'd be fun. And so I have the first book in the series, Cowboy in a Kilt. The hero, Raleigh, he was multi-generational rancher from Texas. He gets screwed out of his family ranch when his dad dies and loses everything. Right. And so his buddy takes him to Vegas to like drown his woes or whatever, where he enters a high-stakes poker game and winds up with a Scottish barony. And he's not entirely sure this is real, but he's like, I have nothing better to do. So he goes to Scotland to see what is what, and finds out, oh, I have to marry the neighboring heiress in order for both of us to keep our estates because of this 300-year-old marriage pact. And so the idea that this was a standalone, all of my entire teams just started laughing their butts off, because I don't do standalone. I'm apparently constitutionally incapable. But like, when I started kind of drafting out the story, I started wondering about, well, who is it that gambled away the estate? And that is where we meet Afton Lennox, who is actually the heroine in Single Dad in a Kilt. So basically, the prequel sets up this situation where she has been raised her entire life. She is supposed to marry the son of the neighboring estate. They were friends, so they were raised to be friends, but it's still like, be like marrying her brother, which is not a thing she wanted to do. And she was in love with someone else who was his best friend. Who's married, so it's not like anything has ever happened. He like went off and did his own thing, but he's an attorney, and he's basically spent his entire career trying to find a loophole to get them out of this insanity. And he finally finds one, which is what's covered in the prequel. And so she takes it and runs. And that is sort of the thing that sets up, this is the catalyst that sets up the avalanche of everybody else that falls. And so Single Dad in a Kilt is her finally coming back to sort of face the music and everybody that she left, because she did this thing in a desperate moment for freedom, And there were a lot of potential consequences to everyone she left behind. So she's been gone for this big chunk of time, and she's finally coming back, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna face this and deal with it. And she has no idea when she comes back that Hamish is divorced now. And so suddenly, like, for the first time in her life, he's available. And it's like, okay. And when I started all of this, I really didn't know what their story was going to be. I just knew that they were the pairing, and she was very quiet through 4 other books. And I'm like, okay, girl, you got to tell me what's going on now, because I don't know. And it ended up being this hysterically fun thing where he has a tween daughter who decides to parent trap them. And so it ends up being this kind of like friends to lovers, nanny parent trap thing.
Gotcha. Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. Now, as you mentioned earlier, setting a contemporary small town romance in Scotland is not something you hear a lot about. If it's across the pond, it's usually a little English village or something. You don't hear too much about Scottish. Most Scottish romances tend to be historical romance. Were you tempted to dip your toe in historical romance, in Scottish historical romance, or were you just you never wavered from this has got to be contemporary?
No, I am definitely a contemporary author. Like, I love reading historical, but I have a real big problem with, like, I have to get it right. And there's like a big burden of research and whatnot, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
I have so much respect for historical authors who like make sure that, oh, this is a word that would have been used at this time, and all of the nitpicky stuff. That's just not my jam.
Right. Now that makes sense. That's fair. What appealed to you most about setting this series in Scotland?
I mean, men in kilts.
That's a good answer.
I mean, it's beautiful. I love the culture. I love the idea of getting to sort of show off like village life over there. I studied abroad in Scotland, and so I spent some time, it's been 20 years out of date, but I spent some time over there, and I wanted to show kind of the similarities between sort of like small town South, which is where I'm from, and just how everything is over there, because the people are just great.
Heather, why set your series in 16th century Scotland? What was going on at that time and place that was conducive to a compelling love story?
There's a lot of drama in Scotland throughout the ages. But I am also a big Elizabethan, I love Queen Elizabeth I, right? And so she was born in 1533, in the early 16th century. And then by the time she dies in 1603. So all of that, I like that I can refer to her when my heroines are, when they're stuck with a lot of patriarch. Okay. We've got a great example going on in England where there's a woman on the throne of England. And so I like that because it sort of gives my heroines that added boost of, that they can be warrior women sort of thing. Plus I guess my very first book was in the 1500s. And so I had to do so much research for that. And I have something on my computer that's always open. Every time I use a word that I'm not sure, I have to go look it up. Like say the word penis, right? That's not used until the 1700s.
Oh.
Yeah. So I've actually made word finds with all the other words that they used. And anyway, some of them I can't use because I'm not going to have anyone talking about their fiddle, but which was a word they used.
Was there another noteworthy name that you came across?
I have a whole list of them, but I can't. I mean, the ones I use the most are things like jack, yard, cod,
yeah.
Things like, and they use the word cock. They use some of these words, but they, so I have to make sure when I'm writing, that it's like, I try to steer away from anything even into the 1600s. If they used it in the 1600s, but not in the 1500s, I don't use it, you know? So it's kind of amazing trying to figure all that out. But I love words. I love rolling around in them. So the origin of words and when I can use what, I really do like. So once I wrote 1 book, 2 books, 3 books, 4 books in that that time period, that's like, I know it better than like modern Scotland, like contemporary. Like I know more about Scottish history than I'll ever know about American history. And so it became easier. And so I did write one series set in the 1600s because I wanted to include tea.
Oh, what
Tea was not something that was really, they didn't drink it for pleasure until the mid 1600s. So I told my editor that I would like to do a series where I could have some tea. But otherwise,
it meant that a true tea lover right there.
I am a tea lover.
I mean, did tea play a big part in the plot, or
no?
Oh, okay.
I just wanted them to be able to drink tea and talk about it a little bit. And there are these teacups that break, and the sister who's had this thing uses the pieces to create a mosaic. So something beautiful comes out of something tragic. So there was a reason, but I could have done that with other dishes. But I love tea. I collect teapots and all that stuff. It's like,
yes, actually, that is a good segue to me asking about which research sources inform your writing. Now, you did mention earlier that you visited Scotland, so you have those visuals. I'm sure you have pictures and whatnot, and but and history. Like, what do you watch YouTube videos? Are you actually going through encyclopedias, dusting those off?
Yeah, I do use, I do a lot of research. Like a lot of clans have done research online with their history, and the Scottish UK websites have a lot on the different castles. I have a midwife's source document from the 16th century, what midwives thought, very interesting, actually. And they were pro clitoris.
So if a penis was called Jack, was the clitoris like Jill? Like what was
I don't know. There's
called?
A lot of different names, I guess. I don't have those at the top of my head.
Oh, okay. Well, I would think you would, but that's okay.
I know I should. But so I have a few source documents that, I've been able to order. And quotes, and I love to use quotes in my books, so I can get a lot of quotes from Shakespeare's around that time. Elizabeth, of course, you can still get Henry VIII there. He died in 1547. So there's a lot of interesting quotes I can use, and I get those from various places. But I think the part that really is my source and inspiration is visiting. I told my husband I had to go and roll around on a moor, which I did last June. Well, not this last June, the June before, 2022. Wow. I met shaggy cows. I got to brush them. I explored a few 16th century castle ruins where we climbed all up in them, and got to see all the little mason marks etched into the stone. And I got to hold on to the wall and think, who stood here crying, who stood here so excited that they had this piece of land that they could hand down for generations, who bled here, so all of that was very important. And that's what really inspires me. I think it's those feelings that I feel like I can pull in, the emotion. Because you can find all the facts you want, but unless you write it with emotion, it doesn't mean anything.
Of course, yeah. So, Kate, you mentioned studying abroad. So I'm sure that you draw upon your own memories to inform your writing of Kilted Hearts series. What other sources did you use? Did you just, look up hot Scottish guys on Instagram? something?
No, not
like that?
specifically. I mean, there are certainly some that I follow. I basically poll my readers to find all of the Scots because I'm like, hey, my information is kind of 20 years out of date. So I had a group of about 6 or 7 readers who kind of are in a little small group with me. And I'm like, hey, and so I'd ask them questions about, what is sort of the current thoughts on this, or how would you guys say that, or whatever, because it is, I'm trying to sprinkle in the cadence of how they speak and whatnot in a way, and the slang, not so it's like very overwhelming and you have no idea what the heck they're saying, like if you were to walk down the street in Glasgow, but enough to, make it clear that like, oh, this actually sounds authentic. And I've had a few reviews in the books that are from Scots who were like, oh, she got it right. And I'm like, thank God.
Nice.
Because that's something that is very important to me. I want to make sure that I can get it as correct as I can, as somebody who is not from there that is writing about there.
See, you're doing just as much research as historical.
Maybe not quite as much, but there's definitely I'm definitely drawing on the personal feel of what it was like to be there. Like the moment I got off the plane, it was this immense sense of, oh, I'm home now. And just like visceral, and just I've studied abroad in Edinburgh. I was at the University of Edinburgh, and just wandering around town, there is this immense sense of age that we don't have here because our country's just not that old. And so that was something, the history, the fact that it's just like it's soaked into everything in a way that is very profound, that you feel even, now. And that's sort of a thing that I don't get too deep into because that's not my jam particularly, but certainly the history of both of the estates that are at the center of the series, they keep talking kind of, because one of them is like a 600-year-old castle, and they're trying, a lot of it starts because they're trying to save the family estate that's like crumbling in places and whatnot. And they end up opening an event venue thing to host like weddings and stuff. Because who wouldn't want to get married in Scotland?
I know, yeah.
I wrote so many weddings for this book.
Did it become tedious after a while, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to the end, and because because they had a business doing weddings, I was doing snippets of lots of people's weddings throughout the series for various points, and then trying to hit that in like the bonus epilogues and that. And by the end, I'm like, I can't write any more vows. I just can't.
Let's talk a little bit about accents. Why are Scottish accents so sexy? Why do readers love to read characters with Scottish accents? I'm trying to get to the heart of it. I don't know if there's an actual answer.
It's a good growly sort of accent. Like, it feels like a manly accent.
Alpha.
Yeah.
So is that what we respond to? Is there's something intrinsic, like, oh, a masculine sound? It's like, oh, yeah. Like, I feel like it's biological, maybe, that like a response.
I question how much of it is biological and how much of it is we are programmed to hear that accent and then associate it with kilts, which also lead to, frankly, easy access.
Easy access kilts. Okay. Now, when both of you visited Scotland and you studied there, Kate, I mean, obviously people aren't walking around every day with kilts, but did you have occasions to see people, men dressed up in kilts?
I mean, there are men that is their daily attire.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought it was just
not
special
regalia kind of stuff, but you'll see a lot of guys in like t-shirts.
There were like utility kilts.
Yeah,
so they're
those
not
are very popular.
Fancy.
Utility? You mean like with lots of pockets where you could put stuff? Utility?
They do have some pockets.
There's some pockets, but it's they're less likely to be tartan and more like performance fabrics. Yeah, because this is the kilt version of like work pants.
Okay.
Yeah, my husband has one that's black. It's like a black canvas.
Okay. So do men in Scotland appear to focus on making sure their legs are attractive and fit for the purpose of wearing kilts?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
So not everybody has
Like,
the legs for kilts.
No, you're gonna
okay.
see like there's the selection of guys who are out there who are football players or rugby players or whatever because they're fit.
Yeah.
And therefore have very, very nice legs. And then you see like the little ancient old man who's hanging out at the end of the pub, at the bar, and you don't really want to look at his little knobby white knees.
Also, there's something about, I think, them using Gaelic words makes it feel like special and different than what we're used to.
Because like if you look at, and we're talking Scotland, but if you looked at like French or Spanish or Italian or whatever, anytime you have those kind of heroes, they're sprinkling in, Mia Care or whatever the term is for that country, that is also sexy.
Right.
And all of these words just sound better not in English.
Yeah. I mean, do either of you know how to say I love you in Scottish? I guess Gaelic.
Well, it's like Theo Go More or something like that. Theo Go More.
I don't speak Gaelic, so I can't call you on it.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds legit. So,
yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, but I have it written down somewhere. I describe it as sort of like a deep burbling brook, like it kind of rumbles and tumbles like the granite that makes up the countryside.
Whatever it is you're reading now, my love, read on. Our lives depend upon it.
Now, building on that, why are Scottish heroes and heroines so incredibly attractive to romance readers? And I guess I should ask that separately because I feel like there's different appeals to the contemporary Scottish heroes and heroines and those who are in history. So, I mean, is it all about the accent?
Someone did ask me one time, why are you writing historical? Like what's special about that? And it's sort of like it's a time of legends is what it feels like. It's like if you really looked at like, say, William Wallace, he was not tall and yet his legend is huge. So in the past, we kind of romanticize it, and we romanticize it by making them bigger and broader and things like that. And I think that comes across in a lot of movies and old TV shows and things like that. And so I think that has become sort of the way people view historical Scotland a bit, is through that media.
That makes sense. Kate, your readers, what do they find most attractive about your contemporary Scottish heroes and heroines?
To some extent, it's the fact that I'm still delivering the cinnamon roll hero I always deliver with a Scottish accent and kilts. But the Scots as a people are really fascinating just because like culturally there are very few areas in any kind of industry of the world that was not influenced by a Scottish inventor or a Scottish somebody. For a people that, like, I think they have something like 5 million people in the country, and they are influencing all over the world. So that's something that is just sort of interesting. And they're, I don't know, you see a lot in Scottish when you see them as contemporary, whether they're your classic Scottish billionaire or I don't know, pro sports ball player of some variety or whatever. I think there's just that still that larger than life kind of vibe that Heather's talking about with the historical, because they are bigger than the sum of their parts, I guess, in a sense.
Okay, yeah.
And because of course, regularly when you read about Scots at any time period, they're always going to be like the big burly brawny, make you feel tiny as a woman sort of Scot. And I think that a lot of women find that very appealing as a fantasy.
Let's talk about what's coming up for each of you. Kate, do you have any other Scottish romances planned for the future?
So book 4, Protector in a Kilt, the hero from that was somebody's cousin, and he is a former Royal Marine, and he showed up with friends. So I am actually going to write a spin-off trilogy called Special Ops Scots.
Oh my, that really rolls off the tongue. I like that. Special Ops.
So that launches in June, according to my calendar.
Oh, June of 2024. Okay.
That's when it will start. I'm going to do a prequel that I shamelessly set up at the end of book 5, with a big hook from actually the sister of the hero in Protector in a Kilt. And so it's I was mean. Evil author is evil. I'm like, yes, you're going to want to read this, and here's the pre-order. So I'm not going to get all the way through the series next year because I have a few other things on deck, but it will start next year.
All right, very cool. Heather, what do you have coming up?
Well, I have another series going on, and it's 5 books as well. And I'm writing the 5th book right now. It's called The Brothers of Wolf Isle. And these heroes in the Brothers of Wolf Isle, they're a little less alpha than the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Well, thank you, Heather and Kate, for making time to join me here on Reader Seeks Romance.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.